Let's get into it. What a week. Well, it's official. Donald Trump announced he is running for president in 2024. Yeah, great. Nice. Many prominent GOP officials and former operatives were absent from Trump's Mar-a-Lago announcement Tuesday. Most notably, missing were Matt Gaetz, Mike Pence, and Ivanka Trump, who said that she no longer would be supporting her father's political endeavors. You can't blame Pence, though. Trump invited him to come hang, and that could mean anything. Explain, Pence. I'm waiting to see where Trump lands on several important policy questions. For example, just off the top of my head, I can't help but wonder whether he still would love to watch a live news broadcast of a mob of his supporters grabbing me by my arms and legs and dragging me as I flail and demand to be released across the grass in front of the Capitol, and then putting a rope around my neck as I go quiet and pray to God, and then dragging me up to the gallows, and then pushing me off from a height, but in a kind of dirty way that's not high or fast enough so I don't die immediately, but basically choke to death as the camera cuts away a few seconds too late. Anyway, I waited 2 years to describe the very real possibility of the above, which Trump encouraged and by sheer providence did not happen, as not evil, not monstrous. I just called it, quote, reckless. And then I said this.
He was my president and he was my friend.
You don't know what a friend is, Mike Pence. Reports have detailed the Trump event as low energy, even boring compared to Trump's rallies and speeches of the past. One Fox host even had the stones to say this to Laura Trump.
I'm sure you're very supportive of your father-in-law, but those of us on the outside looking at it, it didn't seem that he got the old magic.
And I'm sure it's totally unrelated to the nationwide Adderall shortage. Meanwhile, even as Republicans gained a House majority in the midterms, Democrats have officially retained control of the Senate. So you know what that means. If you're a federal judge with a picture of you in your chambers shaking Bill Clinton's hand, it's time to retire and make room for a Harvard Law grad who loves three things: expansive interpretations of the 14th Amendment, long distance running, and being born in 1995. It's time for federal judges who believe due process slays. But we still have to win Georgia, obviously. It won't decide the Senate majority, but it will decide some other interesting questions, like, is Herschel Walker a fucking U.S. senator? Are you serious? It would also mean that we would have a majority in every committee, and Vice President Kamala Harris's vote would no longer be required to break a tie, turning her role as president of the Senate into a much more symbolic one, finally freeing her to laugh maniacally about Venn diagrams uninterrupted.
I love Venn diagrams. I really do.
More free time? Oh, cool, said the vice president, stoned and drifting through the Air and Space Museum at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. More free time? Oh, cool, said the vice president, sitting behind her desk in her office in an escape room designed to look like the White House. At a recent campaign speech, Herschel Walker went on a long, rambling digression about a vampire movie he saw.
The other night, I was watching this movie. Called Fright Night, Freak Night, or some type of night, but it was about vampires. I don't know if you know vampires are cool people, are they not? But I'm going to tell you something that I found out. A werewolf can kill a vampire. Did you know that? I never knew that, so I didn't want to be a vampire anymore. I wanted to be a werewolf.
In response, the reporter he was addressing said, "Sir, my question was about the child tax credit." Speaking of chaos, according to Politico, Rick Scott challenged Mitch McConnell at a closed-door lunch this week ahead of Wednesday's leadership elections in the Senate, telling reporters that he is not satisfied with the status quo. Mitch McConnell didn't seem worried, though, telling reporters this.
Look, I don't own this job. Anybody in the conference is certainly entitled to challenge me, and I welcome the contest.
And I welcome the contest, he said again, as the hand in his pocket pushed the little tack deeper into the meat of his thigh. When asked if she'd seek the office of Senate President Pro Tem, which is the third in line to the presidency, Dianne Feinstein told a reporter she hadn't thought about it. Then an aide told Feinstein that, in fact, she'd already declined. We know she's declined. She's declining in front of our eyes. Look at Vermont. Patrick Leahy is 82, so he decided to retire and make room for a young up-and-comer. So now Vermont is going to be represented by a fresh face, Peter Welch, who is, it says here, 75. Come on. And then there's Nancy Pelosi, who announced Thursday that she will step down from the House Democratic leadership when Republicans gain control in January, though she will keep her congressional seat. So buckle up, folks, because I'm feeling some neo-lib cringe coming on. If we could afford it, we'd be playing Hamilton right now. You know what that sound means? It's time for a neo-lib cringe alert. President Biden praised Pelosi as the most consequential Speaker of the House of Representatives in our history. And he would know. Biden served with just about all of them. The most consequential speaker until now, muttered Kevin McCarthy moments before locking his keys, phone, and wallet in his car. Nancy Pelosi has led the Democrats for 2 decades and was the first woman to serve in the post. She's also the first Italian American to hold that position, but people always seem to forget about it. All right. I did go for it. We talked about it. I'm going to address my offstage comments this way now. You think we keep it? Do it again? Shut up. I'm just going to, but people always seem to forget about it. Is that better? What do you think was better? 1 or 2? 2? Leave them both then. During the Obama years alone, she passed the Recovery Act, Dodd-Frank, the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the Affordable Care Act. Most recently, Pelosi oversaw 2 Trump impeachments, passed the American Rescue Plan, and got the Inflation Reduction Act over the finish line. Did she get a permanent daylight savings time bill through the House? No, but does that dim all of her other accomplishments? At 4:48 p.m. it does. During the January 6th insurrection, throngs of armed MAGA freaks screamed at the Capitol building to send over Nancy Pelosi or else they'd come inside and get her. Democrats wanted her. Republicans wanted to be at her. As the insurrection unfolded, Pelosi pushed the administration to respond and to get the counting of electoral votes back on track.
I just got off with the vice president.
And I got off with the vice president-elect. So I'll tell her.
Okay.
Schumer may as well have pulled out a Fisher-Price phone and mashed the buttons with his fist to be met with such a pure, uncut, "Great, honey, mommy's working." And I wanted to take a moment to unironically celebrate Nancy Pelosi, our Prada bag with a gun in it, because underneath the cringe and plenty of criticism that is very much earned is someone who made sure the House she led was not the limiting factor in how progressives our policies would be. And there were 2 examples. Look, it's easy to make fun of a senior citizen from San Francisco with an ice cream freezer and cringe, just weird-ass hand gestures. But she does this. Her hand goes like this. She gestures upside. She gestures inverted, like she's working different muscles. Like, normally people do this. She's always doing this, like really high up. It's very regal. You know what I'm talking about? It's always up. But here's the point. When Democrats had the supermajority in the Senate and we had the House during the first years of the Obama administration, Nancy Pelosi pushed and got a climate bill through the House in the promise that it would be able to get through the Senate. It couldn't, but she got a lot of House Democrats to make a really tough vote, and a lot of them lost their seats over it. And so I think it's pretty fitting that the capstone was passing the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the biggest investment in climate and the environment in world history. The other thing that I always think about is what happened with Obamacare. And Obamacare passes through the House, a more progressive version than what ultimately became the law, and a more progressive version than anything that had passed the Senate had passed through the House. To get that bill through the House, she persuaded a bunch of House progressives to go along in the theory that whatever they would get through the Senate, they would negotiate in the conference and get a more progressive version than what's coming out of the Senate through. Because it was not just about getting the moderates and the dicks like Joe Lieberman on in the Senate. You had to get the House progressives on board who wanted single payer, but understood it probably wasn't possible, but wanted the most progressive bill possible through both the House and the Senate. So that was the plan. The more conservative would pass through the Senate, the more progressive would pass through the House, and they would fix it in the conference committee. But then something happened, which is Ted Kennedy died, and we lost that Senate seat. So we had 59 seats. So now we were screwed because we couldn't pass a new bill through the House and the Senate. We'd already passed the conservative version through the Senate. We'd passed the progressive version through the House. But now we were never going to be able to pass something through the Senate again. So Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Senate figured out a way to have the Democratic House pass the conservative Senate bill under the promise that through reconciliation, they would have 50 votes in the Senate to pass fixes through the budget process to bring the House progressives on board. We were so close to Obamacare not happening, and Nancy Pelosi helped figure out how to get that done. She got a ton of shit done in that time. She did a lot of cringe shit too, but there is no point at which Nancy Pelosi is responsible for what came out of a Democratic Congress or a Democratic administration. She was never the one responsible for something being less progressive. It was always trying to get something as progressive as possible through the more conservative Senate. So I just want to take a moment to be unironically grateful to Nancy Pelosi, because I think sometimes on the Democratic side we do a lot of eating of our own. She's the first female Speaker of the House, which is no small thing. And so we remember her achievements and her many moments of pure cringe, like reading Bono's poem about Ukraine, or having the Hamilton cast memorialize the January 6th insurrection, or wearing kente cloth in support of George Floyd. She could be embarrassing, but she got the job done, like a PT Cruiser or an iPad camera. Because it turns out that reality has a cringe bias. And that's our neolib cringe alert. Hopefully Twitter doesn't exist when this comes out. In other news, a judge in Fulton County, Georgia, has overturned the state's 6-week abortion ban, ruling it unconstitutional and saying the law cannot be enforced. Upon hearing the news, Georgia Senate candidate Herschel Walker told a crowd of supporters, "Please excuse me, I need to make like 30 phone calls." Here in California, Karen Bass on Wednesday became the first woman elected as mayor of Los Angeles, defeating mall magnate Rick Caruso. The Cheesecake Factory flags at the Grove and Americana flew at half staff. We ran a good race and didn't achieve our goal, but thankfully there was no better way to use $100 million to improve our city. Dolly Parton won the Bezos Courage and Civility Award, which comes with a $100 million prize. Jeff Bezos explained, "Her civility is amazing. I'd have simply had Jolene killed." This week also brought a deluge of bizarre details about the collapse of crypto giant FTX after its founder Sam Bankman-Fried allegedly took $10 billion of customer money to fund risky bets by his trading firm. It's kind of neat how even a brand new decentralized financial system eventually morphs into Lehman Brothers, like how crabs evolved 5 separate times. And they did call Katie Porter, which, Betsy, we're going to give, it's unrelated to what's happening in this moment in the monologue. It's just an and, but it's not a, it didn't follow from where we were at. But I appreciate it. Katie Porter won. Anyway, this is why I end up putting my money, see, this is the problem. Now we're on Katie Porter, but the next line, which you wouldn't know because you're in the audience, is about FTX. And Betsy, I love you, which is why I kid. Anyway, back to FTX. This is why I just end up putting my money in old-fashioned markets, specifically Boston market. As FTX collapsed, rumors circulated that Bankman-Fried and his ex-girlfriend were part of a 10-person polycule. FTX's in-house psychiatrist denied those reports, telling the New York Times, "It's a pretty tame place. The higher-ups, they mostly played chess and board games. There was no partying. They were undersexed, if anything." Imagine if everything you built imploded in the most spectacular and embarrassing way possible, and then your psychiatrist tells the New York Times that you're a gamer that never gets laid. I think it's cool. A new video game will allow players to control Jesus Christ as he performs the miracles of the New Testament. There's also a 2-player mode where you can play as his brother Luigi. And for an extra challenge, you can play on Jewish mode. Strength and dexterity are set to 0, but your rabbinical points are maxed out. Personal items from Joan Didion's estate went up for auction this week, with one pair of her sunglasses fetching $27,000. I hope people know you can't absorb writing talent through writer's possession. Stealing Aaron Sorkin's credit cards has done nothing for me talent-wise. Anyway, shout out to the people who have to say, "Oh, wow," when the person who purchased these sunglasses points them out on a tour of their undoubtedly garish home. A gimp in Essex in the UK is upset about another gimp who wears his own full-body skin-tight latex in the Somerset region, but with the intention of scaring people. The Essex gimp said the Somerset gimp is giving gimps a bad name. The Essex gimp tried to perform a citizen's arrest on the Somerset gimp, but getting out of those fuzzy handcuffs is pretty easy. I've heard. Russia placed new sanctions on 100 Canadians, including Jim Carrey. When it comes to Russia, my advice for Jim Carrey would be, do not... I can't do it. I'm going to sit down. I'll do it. It's fine. When it comes to Russia, my advice for Jim Carrey would be, do not go in there. Anyway, Jim Carrey was later seen canceling a trip to Lake Baikal by way of Irkutsk, saying to his travel agent, somebody stop me. I gotta get lower. I can't do it. What? Somebody stop me. Somebody stopped me. That's what it is. And finally, somebody stop me.